Was it the actual literal blood of Jesus that sets us free? Is it the literal blood of Jesus that sets you free, John? No, you're right, because if it was, Jesus would have been saying to John, John, quick, get buckets. We need buckets. Don't waste it. Don't waste a drip. We've got to get to billions of people with this. Don't waste a drip. Look, there's some on the cross. Get that. Sponge it up. Flip. It's not the literal blood of Jesus that sets you free, but the blood sets you free. What is it about the blood that has power to set you free? Haley. Revelation contained within the blood, which is a revelation of truth that has power to set you free. And what is it within the cross that can set you free? There's revelation in the cross, revelation of truth within the cross, which is like nuclear power to boom, set you free and transform lives. And what is this revelation packed up within the blood? What is this revelation packed up inside the cross that sets you free? What is this revelation? There's a revelation of the Father within the cross. There's a revelation of the Father within the blood. There's a revelation of your identity within the cross. There's a revelation of your identity within the blood, which makes the cross and makes the blood so radically powerful that it can transform the most twisted, broken life. Brings total freedom and total transformation, but it is the truth that sets you free. Jesus paid a price, a huge price, a phenomenal price to be up on the cross to broadcast truth. The whole action of the cross is the most powerful revelation of truth in world history. It's the most dynamic, powerful, wonderful, extravagant revelation of the Father in world history. And that's what we want to start unpacking and exploring in this journey. So we are going to go to we'll carry on with this line of thought for a moment. The most common word used for forgiveness in the New Testament, look, my phone's going bananas on me. One moment. Pulling up my Bible. Here we go. You're going to join me in Matthew 26, 28. Jesus says something phenomenal. He says, "This is my blood," as he hands them the cup. "This is my blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." All right, so Jesus here, you could easily mistake the fact here when Jesus said, "This is my blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." You could easily think, oh, okay, right, because Jesus is pouring out his blood for the forgiveness of sins, he's paying for our forgiveness, right? You could easily interpret that from that verse. You could easily come to the conclusion that that's what that means. Except the issue here is that the word used for forgiveness is the Greek word aphesis. And forgiveness is only a small measure of what that word means. And to translate the word aphesis as forgiveness is a tragic disservice to the full meaning of the word. At bare minimum, it should say freedom. At bare minimum, it should say freedom. But if you want to capture the full meaning of the Greek word aphesis, you have to go back in time. So everyone, right, jump with me. Right now we're just going to get in our little time traveling device. Right, you guys all with me in our time traveling device? Yes? Great. Who wants to press the button? Right, whoppity John, he did it. All right, boom. Right, we're back there. Right, we're back now, way back in time. We're back in time. We're a time where people who read in Greek were like, oh gosh, it's a bit of a bummer that we can't read the Hebrew stories and scriptures. What a bummer. What are we going to do? And then someone's like, oh, me, I've got an idea. What's your idea, little Johnny? And little Johnny says, well, what we could do is translate the Jewish scriptures into Greek. And they're like, brilliant idea, Johnny, let's do that. So they did it. And it was called the Septuagint. So the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures is called the Septuagint. And the word that they used in the Septuagint, when they used the word aphesis, the Greek word aphesis in the Septuagint, they used it to translate a really powerful Hebrew word. And the really powerful Hebrew word that was translated as aphesis is the Hebrew word yubel or jubilee. And what yubel or jubilee is, yubel meant ram's horn, or jubilee. What jubilee was is every 50 years they would have a jubilee year. And in the jubilee year, all debts were cancelled, all slaves got set free, so all identity was restored, all inheritances got restored, everyone got to enter the rest, and no one had to work for a year, and it was the party of your lifetime, because you might only get one jubilee. You're probably only going to get one good jubilee party in your lifetime if you're lucky. And so you think about this. Everyone's feeling rich, they're cashed up, they've had their inheritance restored, they've had their identity restored. If you were a slave, you could have been set free. All your debts have been cancelled. All your inheritance restored. You don't have to work for a year, and everyone's in full-scale party mode. This is amazing. If you wanted to communicate the greatest party word in the Old Testament, the craziest, wildest party word that you could come up with in the Old Testament is Jubilee. This is the wildest party of your lifetime. Jubilee is extreme celebration. Can you imagine no work for a year and everyone's feeling rich? Come on! I'm like, no work for 2 days, and I'm like, whoa, that's outrageous. No work for a year, and everyone's feeling cashed up like a boss. This is going to go off. This is exciting, especially if you've just been a slave and you've been set free, or your entire inheritance is restored, or your debts are cancelled. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Now, this is my blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins is a terrible translation. It does not catch the essence of Jubilee at all. But the Greek word aphesis should always be synonymous with the Hebrew concept of Jubilee. So what Jesus is actually saying is, this is my blood poured out for many for the total freedom from sin. Total freedom from sin. So get out of your head. We have to get out of our head that Jesus was on the cross for forgiveness. No, rubbish. It wasn't about forgiveness from sin, as though you're going to be perpetually stuck in a sin cycle. It was about freedom from sin so that you would never play the sin game again, so that you could get out of the sin-conscious existence and get into the divine dance as a moment-by-moment existence. It's about total freedom from everything related to sin. And we discussed sin yesterday, and what is sin? Sin is the false identities that define us. So when Jesus is putting to death sin, what is he actually putting to death? Is it like, was sin a rodent? We have put this rodent to death on the cross. No, sin was not a rodent. What was sin? Sin was something. Sin is something, but what is that sin? What is that something? What was it that was put to death? What was your sinful nature that was circumcised in death? It was false identities. False identities. All those things that you believed about yourself that aren't true. Lies, deception, the orphan illusion. Jesus put the orphan illusion to death on the cross so that we could be forever free from it, and not just a little bit free, like Jubilee free. Like, come on, like the too good to be true news free, like the wild celebration, like the greatest, craziest, most outrageous party word you can come up with free. This is my blood poured